Today I'm going to be talking about The Incredible Hulk, Crossroads. This is part of Marvel's Epic collection. And this is volume 13. I assume that means volume 13 of the Hulk comics in the Epic collection from the years 1984 to 1985. Now, this is the second Marvel Epic Collection book that I have read. The first is The Mighty Thor War of the Gods, which I reviewed previously, and I'll link to that review in the description down below. Um, I've been hearing about Marvel Epic Collections for a long time, mostly through Steve Donahue's and Michael K. Vaughn's channel, but I haven't had the opportunity to read them. I've been living abroad, and it's been hard to get American comic books, but these have started to hit the bookshelves here in Vietnam, so I was able to pick these two up. So, before I get into the content of this, let me just kind of briefly give a quick overview of what you're getting for this. So, this is about $45 US. I paid 900,000 Vietnamese dong, which is about the equivalent. And you do get your money's worth for that. I was reading this for about 6 weeks, and it's 482 pages. I don't know if you can see it's significantly bigger than the Thor Epic collection, although priced accordingly. The Thor one is $39, and nice full color comics, and something that provided me, at least, with weeks of reading. This will vary depending on your reading speed. The criticism I do have about this, though, is I bought this new. I've only read it once. I've been trying to keep these in really good shape because my intention is to donate them to my school library once I'm finished. But the binding is already falling apart after just one read. Look at that. And then over here, look at that. Now that was not the case, and I've been very careful with this. I've been treating it as gently as I can, and it still has fallen apart on me. I don't know what's going on. But consider that your little bit of buyer beware with this volume. All right, now to set this up, I'm going to try and briefly recap my history of comic books because that's going to inform somewhat how I'm approaching this volume. And for those of you who have been watching this channel regularly and have heard this spiel before, just forgive me. I'll try and be really brief on this. As a kid, I was fascinated by comic books. I think all young boys are. I was not allowed access to them because I grew up in a religious household with religious parents. Certainly not allowed access to superhero comics, at least when I was young. Once I started to get a little bit of independence, a driving permit, part-time job, around 15 or 16, I was able to buy them myself. And I had, I don't remember, about a year and a half of reading comic books at that time in the mid 90s. I only read DC, largely just because I was realizing that the comic book continuity was all intertangled. And so if you wanted to kind of follow a story, you had to buy a whole bunch of issues from a single publisher. I decided I only had enough money to follow one publisher, and I just was more attracted to DC at the time. I viewed their heroes as being more iconic, and I think in the 90s, Batman and Superman were more in the popular mainstream than the Marvel comic books were at that time. So, never read any Marvel as a kid. Had about a year and a half of reading DC Comics and was initially fascinated by them, but you know what it's like at that age. You go through phases very quickly. And by the time I was 17, I decided I had largely grown out of them. Um, and I think, maybe by the time you're 17, you are starting to grow out of comics. I've retained my interest or fondness for comic books somewhat, though, and every few years I come back to them sort of. Although I've been living abroad for the past 20 plus years, which has made it a little bit hard to track down comic books. Although, like I said, these are hitting the bookshelves here in Vietnam now. There are more at my school library at the moment. Um, so, access to comic books over the years has been an issue, but I do come back to them every now and again. Okay, so that's my history with comic books. Now, the Incredible Hulk in particular. The Incredible Hulk. I didn't read his comics. I wasn't allowed to when I was a young kid, and when I was a teenager, I was concentrating on DC comics. But the Incredible Hulk was on TV a lot when I was a child. There was a popular live action TV show in the late 70s and early 80s. And I think based partly on the popularity of that live action TV show, there was also a cartoon TV show. I was not allowed to watch either the live action one or the cartoon, uh, but I was aware of it. You couldn't not be aware of it. I would catch bits and pieces of it, when I was at a friend's house or when my dad was flipping channels. So I saw little bits and pieces of it. And to this day, actually, I have not seen a full episode of the early 80s, late 70s Incredible Hulk TV show. But the impression I got of it was that Bruce Banner was living somewhat of a tortured existence. He was desperately trying to keep the Incredible Hulk under control. He was desperately trying to find a cure. And he was trying to avoid getting himself in situations that would trigger releasing the Incredible Hulk. However, trouble just seemed to have a way of finding Bruce Banner, and so the bad guys would always get him, or he'd always find himself in some sort of predicament where he would be under a lot of stress and his life would be in danger. He would try and try not to get angry or get frightened and release the Hulk, but at some point, the circumstances would just become so overwhelming that he would lose control of his emotions. The Hulk would get released. And then when the Hulk got released, the Hulk was just totally a loose cannon. He would just smash everything in sight, and you never knew if it was going to have a beneficial result, like if he was going to smash the bad guys, or if it was going to put innocent civilians in danger, which is why Bruce Banner always tried so hard not to release the Hulk. Then once the Hulk was done smashing and his rage would subside, he would become tired and then he would revert back into Bruce Banner, and then Bruce Banner would just have to pick up the pieces of whatever rampage the Hulk had just gone on. So the angst there of Bruce Banner's kind of tortured existence seemed like an interesting emotional hook, and it's something that fascinated me as a kid, and then in my 20s when I started to kind of get a re-fondness for comics, it's something that made me think, I really ought to check out some Incredible Hulk comics. I was largely disappointed by the two movies that came out in the 2000s, both the Ang Lee one and the Edward Norton one. I wanted to like them, but they just largely bored me. When I was studying at the University of Melbourne, they had some of the Marvel Essential comics, and I read through some of them. There was an Incredible Hulk collection, and that one largely bored me as well. And I think it largely bored me because it was not focusing on the tortured life of Bruce Banner. It was focusing on the Hulk. You barely saw Bruce Banner. The Hulk would just stay in Hulk mode for whole issues at a time, just fighting various things, and it wasn't terribly interesting to me. And I think, I don't know, the more maybe I get into these Hulk comics, the more I realize that maybe the TV show was a little bit different than the comics. In the comics, Bruce Banner seems to play less of a role, and the Hulk is just takes center stage a lot in the comics. And maybe budgetary reasons in the TV show is one reason why they wanted to focus on Bruce Banner more. Maybe that was driving it. I don't know. I also I saw the video Steve Donahue did on the Incredible Hulk a couple years ago, part of his epic comic book Wednesday, in which Steve Donahue said, I don't know why anybody would like the Hulk. I mean, the Hulk has his fans, but he's such a boring character. He's got the intellect of a 6-year-old. He gets into confrontations, and he always just resolves those confrontations through brute force, just smashing everything. He can't grow, he can't change, he can't develop. He just mopes around. Why would this be interesting to anybody? And I saw that video and I thought, yeah, actually maybe that's it. I think Steve Donahue said it. It might be interesting if the comics had focused more on Bruce Banner, but they don't. I'll have to take Steve's word for it. I've only read a couple collections. But this collection certainly doesn't focus on Bruce Banner, although there is an in-narrative reason for that. Bruce Banner pops up at the end. So, that's my background. Now, let's get into it. So this collection collects the Incredible Hulk from 1984 to 1985. So about a year and a half. And, the thing I always like to keep in mind when I'm looking at these years is that, when you get to middle age, a year and a half is nothing. But when you're 14 or 15, or when you're 7 or 8 or 9, the age a lot of these young readers are reading these comics, this is like an eternity. So for kids reading these comics as they came off the newsstands, this was an epic storyline that spanned forever. And I think that's one of the things that's cool about that. And there is definitely, there are some narrative leaps in here, but this is more or less one coherent whole storyline. And of course, like all comics, it's a continuation of a previous storyline. So we don't get a clean beginning and we do not get a clean end, but there are some story arcs in the middle of this. So we start off, I believe, now take everything I say with a grain of salt, because as I've admitted previously, I don't know a lot about Marvel continuity. My exposure to it has been limited. But I believe what I've gathered from Wikipedia and whatnot, that throughout his 50-odd year run in comics, the Hulk has gone through various incarnations. And one incarnation I guess he went through was when Bruce Banner was able to gain control of the Hulk. So he had the strength of the Hulk, but the mind of Bruce Banner was, I guess, the incarnation of the Hulk that must have preceded the storyline. So I don't know how long this lasted for. Sometime maybe in the early 80s. And so this had been the incarnation of the Hulk, but this got destroyed by Nightmare. Now, Nightmare was I guess one of Doctor Strange's villains, but Doctor Strange and Hulk had been teammates on the Defenders. So Nightmare wanted to get revenge on Strange through his teammate Hulk. So Nightmare was... Now, there's a little bit of some comic book logic here, so just bear with me. Able to penetrate into the mind of the Hulk / Bruce Banner and inflame fears in his subconscious in order to make it so Bruce Banner totally lost control and a mindless animal, Hulk, came out. Who starts off very mindless and gets increasingly mindless as these comics go on, to the point where the narration repeatedly just describes him as an animal. Now there is some. So this is what we get into when we get into the Steve Donahue criticism of the Hulk, where he's just a mindless animal with the intellectual capacity of the 6-year-old, and as a interesting protagonist, that's limited, especially when you're spending this much time with him. But there is some interesting angst built around the Hulk. So there's Bruce Banner's girlfriend. I forget her name here. She's not Betty Ross, but I guess at this point in the continuity, this is his current girlfriend, who's trying to get Bruce to come back from the monster. Then there's this guy who's one of the, what is he? I forget, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. or one of the S.H.I.E.L.D. subgroups, who's not so sympathetic to the Hulk and just wants to exterminate him. And they argue over what should be done. The Hulk is becoming uncontrollable, and not only uncontrollable, but really belligerent. So the previous incarnation of the Hulk was somebody who just wanted to be left alone but kept getting harassed by the U.S. military. This incarnation of the Hulk is not one who just wants to be left alone. He just gets angry whenever he sees people, and then he starts smashing things up for no reason. So definitely a menace here that needs to be contained. And that's the story that we start off with. Now, I suppose this is an unavoidable evil of comic book storytelling, serialized storytelling, but with every new issue, the narration needs to get the reader up to speed on what's going on with the Hulk at this current moment. So, not long ago, he was a hero acclaimed by all, but now monster, they call him, for monster he is. And it just, the beginning of every issue just recalls that he used to be a hero, but now he's lost control. It gets a little bit repetitive when you read them all together. Doctor Strange tries to intervene but is not able to. Doctor Strange tries to reach the Bruce Banner, who's buried deep into Hulk's subconscious. But Bruce Banner chooses to just commit suicide rather than try and take control of the body again and have to deal with the Hulk. The Bruce Banner doesn't have a body at this point. He's just a personality occupying the psyche of the body that both he and Hulk share. But I guess the personality commits suicide. I don't know how that's really possible, but that's established there. And then it's repeated several times in the narrative that Bruce Banner has chosen to die. So the Hulk goes on a rampage. Various superheroes come in to try and save the civilians, and it ends with a whole bunch of people showing up, but the Avengers. Now, there's a lot of powers here, but I guess the Hulk's power is that the angrier he gets, the stronger he gets. So you just can't win. Although there is a big epic fight between him and Thor. But eventually, Doctor Strange decides that the Hulk just cannot be beaten in a fight, cannot be contained. And so there's only one thing to do, which is to send him to another dimension, which is the Crossroads, which is where the name of this collection comes from. So in the Crossroads, Hulk has access to many different universes. I don't know if it's an infinite amount or just a lot. I don't remember. It's probably in the text somewhere. Now, he does have... Doctor Strange has arranged it somehow so that all of the universes at this crossroad are not endangered by the Hulk. So they're all universes that can take care of themselves. And also, Doctor Strange has given the Hulk a defense mechanism. Whenever the Hulk gets bored or disenchanted with any universe that he's in, he automatically just fades away and ends up back at the Crossroads. So the Hulk goes through several universes. So the first one, you can see here, the first one, there's some sea creatures that he fights. Then he ends up smashing a bunch of stuff, but it turns out it's just a toy set that this giant little boy has. And the giant little boy is just overjoyed to see a monster smashing his toy set. He says, he didn't tell me Demolition City that it came with a real live monster. You just go on smashing, okay? I'll put everything together when I get back. So the boy is overjoyed to see Hulk just smash stuff up. Thinks that's the funnest thing ever. And maybe that does explain the appeal of Hulk for Hulk's target audience. And keep in mind, target audience for this is... Well, what is the target audience for this at this age? I mean, at this stage in comic history. I know plenty of adults were reading comics in the 80s. And there was that shift from being a child's entertainment to being adult entertainment. But, I still think this was largely driven by readership of under 15. I don't know. So this is the conceit, that Hulk can go through multiple different universes. And in fact, if you flip through this book, you can see multiple different worlds that Hulk travels to. So, you have this brainless, brain-dead brute of a hero who is inherently uninteresting. But you have this narrative set up now where he can go to many different multiple universes and explore interesting universes, even though our hero himself is not all that interesting. So we've got potential here. The narrative at this point is just repeatedly driving in the point that Hulk is just a savage beast with no comprehension. So with the sacrifice of Bruce Banner's persona, the Hulk alone remained. More savage, more brutish, more animalistic than ever, since no remnant of humanity existed to moderate his rage. There was no longer any thought of curing the Hulk or restoring Bruce Banner. Dr. Banner was, for all intents and purposes, dead. To an interdimensional intersection, the giant might... Okay, sorry. Where is it? Somewhere in here it's going to pick up again, and it's going to emphasize that the Hulk... Yeah. Not that the Hulk remembers Earth. He was another creature when he dwelt on the world of his birth, a creature torn between two identities. If it draws analogies, it is only on the animal level, sense, sights, sounds, prompting instinctual remembrance of peace or peril. So he's just purely an animal brain now. He can only remember vague senses, or I don't know if remember is the right word. He doesn't really remember it. He just have these kind of senses that spark familiar feelings. So the narrative, the narration is just going out of its way to say this is a brute beast with no thinking, no feeling, no memories. And I'm thinking, well, why am I reading this? I mean, what is the hook? So I guess it's the places he goes to. So he gets a parasite attached to him in this world. And it turns out that the parasites have somewhat of a symbiotic relationship with their hosts. it's interesting, but as with a lot of these worlds, we get to the limitation of the form here. Uh, and it's not that complex storytelling isn't possible in comics, because to a large extent, this whole chunk is an example of a complex storytelling that goes on for a year and a half. But when the Hulk is only limited to one world per issue, we just get a very superficial view of that world. So the symbiote attaches himself to Hulk. Hulk grows to like the symbiote. The other symbiotes don't like it, so Hulk climbs a mountain because the symbiote wants to see the view from the mountain. The symbiote dies because of the cold, and that's the end. And then there's another world that Hulk goes to, which has got kind of like this medieval fantasy vibe going. So now in this world, Hulk can be pierced. His skin can be pierced by these primitive medieval weapons. Now in the previous world on Earth, he couldn't even be hurt by bullets. So this doesn't entirely make sense to me, except that the narration says, well, different worlds have different rules, and I guess on this world, Hulk's skin is vulnerable. Okay, so fair enough. So Hulk is strong, but not invulnerable. There's a princess here on this world who's captured by some bad people. This actually goes into 2 issues. There's these evil stone people. Now the princess comes from an idyllic, enchanted world behind a rose garden, a rose wall which keeps out evil. But when her father was gone, she and her father's apprentice made the mistake of trying to journey out behind the rose wall, and that's what started all this trouble. I don't know if this was just me, but just the visuals here with the blue and green and the idyllic nature people frolicking. It was just reminding me of the Smurfs. You can kind of see it here, right? La 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 la, which was another thing that was popular at this time period. So I don't know if that was consciously influencing the writers, but it's yet another thing where we get this interesting glimpse of world building here, but we don't really get enough depth into any of this to be satisfying. It's just, there's this rose place, there's a stone place, then the Rose Princess realizes her power. The Hulk is largely just an observer in this story, and then it's all over. It's intriguing, but it wasn't enough. It didn't give me enough. Then, oops, sorry, almost dropped my phone. Then right after that, we get the sense that the writer, or writers, I don't know, is already kind of out of ideas for this Crossroads thing. An infinite amount of universes that Hulk could go into, but they seem to run out of ideas, and they have Hulk meet a supervillain team called, what is their names again? The UFOs, which Hulk had battled once before in earlier continuity. Now, how they end up here is not really explained. They're able to shift through realities as well, but it seems to be a complete coincidence that they end up at the same crossroads as Hulk. So he's here at the crossroads between universes. He's not even chose a different universe, but he fights them at the crossroads. So now the crossroads itself has become the place where the action happens. Although they journey into some other universes along the way. And then, almost as soon as that happens, we get more of Hulk's antagonists just randomly showing up at the Crossroads. So I don't know how everyone is showing up at this interdimensional Crossroads now. That was supposed to be this place that Doctor Strange had sent Hulk, but now there's this Latu, who is this energy star, huge monster which sucks the energy from stars. And there's a ship full of aliens who are pursuing him. And they have a history with Hulk. So they had in some sort of, you know how comic books work. In Hulk 136, they had encountered Hulk before. And these are flashbacks to the previous adventure with Hulk. So the Captain Cyborg in the previous adventure had gone into the sun, the heart of the sun, with the Beast. Now his body is completely burned away, and he's just simply part of the ship. So it's kind of like a cursed, eerie existence. So this seems kind of vaguely interesting. Of course, I've not seen this previous adventure. I looked it up on Wikipedia to try and find more of what the backstory is, and according to Wikipedia, this took place, this flashback, the Hulk's first encounter with them, in the early 70s, like 71 or something. Now these adventures are happening in the mid 80s, so that's like a 14-year gap, which is, one of the frustrating things about comic books, and also one of the wonderful things about comics. And again, I'm going back to my memories of when I was 15, 16, buying comics in the comic book store, where there were the new releases, and then you could go through the back issues in the bargain, and some of them in the bargain bin, some of them in the really overpriced bin. And there was no Wikipedia or anything at that time, right? So there were all these allusions to past stories that if you were new to comics, you were just catching bits and pieces of it, but it was so tantalizing to get glimpses of this larger story and to know that there was this very intricate, long story out there, which you were only getting glimpses and pieces of. And this is somewhat of an extreme example of this, with picking up on a storyline that was, 14 years old at this point, which was, the older readers could remember it, but the any of the readers under 15 wouldn't have had a clue about it. This is kind of like a Moby Dick-esque storyline, and the Wikipedia explicitly says Moby Dick was the inspiration for this. I guess Moby Dick was the inspiration for the original story in the early 70s, and then this kind of little sequel to it. So they want to capture the star-sucking beast so they can get his energy from it and live forever. The Hulk, they've captured the Hulk and forced him to be part of their quest because they need his strength on the rowing, even though they've been doing fine without him until this point, and they know he's going to be trouble. It doesn't really entirely make sense, but that's what's set up. And it all ends in disaster and tragedy for these Captain Ahab and his crew. In no small part because the Hulk messes up all their plans. So then the Hulk is back on the Crossroads, and there's this being called, what is it called? The Powerpuff Collective. who's also in exile with the Hulk. Now, to give credit where credit is due, this is something that's been teased out for a long time. So, at the very beginning, when Hulk got put into the Crossroads way back in November of 1984, this Powerpuff Collective was with him. And the Powerpuff Collective is always at the Crossroads, but they can't accompany Hulk into any of the lands he goes to. But they're trying to communicate with Hulk, trying to befriend Hulk. And so this is a... they help Hulk fight the UFOs. And they become... Hulk becomes more and more trusting of them. So this is an interesting thing of a storyline that gets... here we are in June of the following year. So that's a long time to tease out that storyline. And that, again, that's what I like about comic books, is that they do have these long simmering plot points that take their time to pay off. But the Powerpuff Collective is trying to get Hulk to bring it back to its own world, where it turns out the Powerpuff Collective says, "Fool!" and disappears. It turns out the Powerpuff Collective was evil all the time and was in league with these demons. And then Hulk has to fight these demons. At the same time that the Powerpuff Collective brings him over here, we get 3 new characters showing up who are Hulk's allies. A little elf girl with a bow and arrow called Guardian, a goblin called Goblin, and what is this star called? The star has a name as well. I forget what it is. At first it's not entirely clear what they are and why they're following Hulk around and trying to protect him. Yeah, there it is. Glow. Glow is the name of the star. But it turns out that they are projections of Bruce Banner's subconscious. The way that the Hulk is the one manifestation of Bruce Banner's subconscious, they are also there. And because the Bruce Banner psyche has kind of committed suicide, they've emerged to take his place, being the super ego to Hulk's raging id. It's not entirely clear to me if they have any sort of corporal abilities in the physical world, or if they're just purely figments of Hulk's imagination. Or they must be figments of Bruce Banner's imagination, because they know things that the Hulk doesn't, or yeah, it's not entirely clear to me how this is working out, but they're part of the Hulk persona now. And on this world, Guardian has an arrow which imbibes Hulk with reason, which brings back Bruce Banner. Now, it's not entirely clear to me how Bruce Banner came back here, especially... I mean, it wasn't entirely clear to me how he died in the first place. Like I said at the beginning of this review, this is, on the whole, I think, an impressive overarching storyline to keep going after so many months, but there are some narrative leaps in it. I think this might be one of them. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, I think Bruce Banner persona is much more interesting than the Hulk. And we get them here. So he gets transformed back into Bruce Banner, like at the worst time. Right when he should be rampaging against these goons who want to sacrifice him. He gets changed back into helpless Bruce Banner. But Bruce Banner still maintains his death wish. So he's here. I mean, on the one hand, he's got the natural self-preservation instincts. that kind of kick in. Um, he's got a human's fear of death, but on the other hand, he thinks, well, maybe it's just as well as I die. So he's completely, well, not completely, but he has a very morbid sense of humor. He meets this mad Scottish scientist who is in this strange alien world, uh, and he's just like, yeah, why not? Lead on, Macduff. Uh, of course, once he finds out what that mad scientist has been up to, he does become completely horrified by it. Tries to put a stop to it, which, of course, trying to flee from it triggers the Hulk again. But now it's more back to the old Hulk. Um, and then we get this extended flashback to Bruce Banner's early life, where we find out that he was abused as a child by his father. He took refuge with a doll and a star at the Christmas tree, which are where these elements of the triad come from. I think if I'm reading Wikipedia right, Wikipedia says that the idea that Bruce Banner, so there was an idea introduced into the Hulk mythology at a point, I believe Wikipedia says it was in the 80s, it wasn't purely the gamma ray bomb that brought about the monster. Bruce Banner also had an unhappy childhood, an abused childhood, which had these feelings of suppressed rage. Also, possibly a genetic mutation, which he inherited from his father, who was also working on these radioactive bombs. So his father knows that his son is likely containing that mutation, and his father lashes out at his son. He's something different, inhuman, my son the monster. So Bruce Banner has all this childhood trauma which he internalizes, and this is the Hulk kind of being formed here. So it's not just the gamma rays, it's Bruce's genetic predisposition mixed in with the abuse and his traumatic childhood, and then being bullied at school, etc. And this is, if you recall, this was the narrative that Ang Lee movie took in 2003. And I think, if I'm reading Wikipedia right, this is when it was introduced into the Hulk comics. The idea that, yeah, it wasn't purely the bomb. It was Bruce Banner's inherited a genetic mutation from his father, plus the suppressed rage from his abusive childhood. So an interesting narrative twist, but a bit difficult to read at the same time. I mean, look at that. This is it's. I guess it just depends what you want out of a comic book. If you want kind of heavier stuff, this is heavier stuff. If you want pure escapism, like a fun superhero story, then this is really a downer, isn't it? This poor abused child whose only solace was in this doll, and then his father kills his mother, and then to make things worse, General Thunderbolt Ross tears the arm off of his doll later. So it a little bit of a depressing read there. Okay, so we get back done with that flashback. Now there's some sort of a tie-in here to Secret Wars 2, which I don't really know anything about Secret Wars 2. I do, yeah. Again, this is one of those good and bad things about comics. As a kid, again, it fascinated me how interconnected they all were. So it wasn't a linear story; it was like a mosaic story, a web of stories, all kind of intersecting. On the other hand, obviously, the cynical reason they did that is to get every last dollar out of you. So you had to buy a whole bunch of different issues to follow the storyline. Which, speaking of which, comes in here. So this character who's, I don't know who he is, somehow connected to Secret Wars 2. And if the pitch wasn't obvious enough, then they have an overt advertisement down here at the bottom. Go ahead and buy all these issues to see what's going to be happening. Secret Wars 2, Alpha Flight 29. And then we have a crossover with the characters from Alpha Flight, where there's something about a line that's being shot that the Secret Wars character is guiding. I don't know if it's Walter Lang, who was Bruce Banner's roommate, but later become the Saskatchewatch, who has got his own long continuity that I don't fully understand. Sorry, I'm talking in a tired voice because it's a little bit tiring to try and summarize all of this, especially because I've already been talking for 46 minutes. Apologies, brevity is not my strong point. But although I somewhat tire of explaining this, as a reader, I do, as I mentioned earlier, a large part of me finds this interconnected continuity just fascinating. And I certainly did when I was a kid. And it brings us back to Alpha Flight. So I guess here we go. This is another crossover issue. Now, the nice thing about these Marvel Epic collections, or I guess this one here, is it includes the bonus material you need to know to follow the story. So Alpha Flight number 29, even though that was a different series, gets included here because this is where the storyline goes. And the Alpha Flight team fights the Hulk. And I know nothing about Alpha Flight. It's again, like I said before, it's interesting to see the little glimpses of the Alpha Flight story going on here. There's all this little drama that's being set up here, and they fight the Hulk. The fight itself strikes me as very boring. And I think this is largely just because I'm too old for comics now. When I was 15, or if I got my hands on comics when I was even younger than that, I used to love reading these fights, and I used to go back again and just analyze each swing and each punch and thought it was so great. Now I just read through it and it's just boring to me. I think that's just part of getting older, whether it's a chemical difference or the maturation of your brain or whatever. These fights just are no longer interesting to me. So that's one of the problems of reading comics in middle age. And then it ends here. And, the story keeps going because it's a comic book, and comic books always are one long story, but you have to end somewhere because you've got to end the volume at some point. So 482 pages, that's not bad. And I guess if you want to find out what happened before this, you'd buy volume 14. If you want to find out what happened... if you want to find out what happened after this, you'd buy volume 14. If you want to find out what happened before this and find out what was going on to set up all this stuff, you'd have to buy volume 12. Yeah. To wrap this up, what's my takeaway on here? I remain. I sorry, I'm having a hard time deciding where I want to begin on this. I think I think that if you were the right age for this, say you were 14, maybe even a little bit younger, 13, 12. I mean, what is the ideal age for this? You can't be too young, because if you're too young, then you're not going to be able to follow all the continuity and the evolving storyline and the crossovers and stuff like that. On the other hand, I think you do kind of start to age out of the stuff around 17. But maybe around 12, 13, 14, 15 would be the ideal age for this. I think if you were the ideal age for this when this series came out, sorry, dropped the phone. Uh, this would have been the best thing ever to just see this character uh, go through these stages and the story evolve over. It was a year and a half in this collection, but again, this starts with the story ongoing and ends with the story ongoing. So who knows how long they keep these stories going? Well, I guess they just keep them going forever. Huh? That's comic books. Um, where he's stuck on the crossroads for about a year in terms of a year in our time in terms of when these were hitting the newsstand. Um, and things just slowly teased out the interconnectedness of it and the crossovers. I imagine this would have just been completely fascinating to its target audience at that time. Um, with the caveat that the Hulk is not always the most interesting character, and this iteration of him in particular is not very interesting. And for reasons I don't quite understand, the narrator goes out of its way to just emphasize that this is purely a brute with no reason at all, even more so, or even less so, I guess, than previous iterations of the Hulk. He's on the crossroads where he has the potential to go to any number of fantastic universes. And in the hands of a better writer, that could have really led to some wacky adventures. But the writer or writers here really just don't know what to do with it. He goes to a couple places that are okay, not that interesting, and then they just run out of ideas. And so then he just fights his normal villains at the crossroads, and the multiple universes are just kind of in the background. But yeah, yeah. So I guess that's my summary of it. So some strengths and some weaknesses. I'm going to finish up here. Thank you very much.